Okay, sorry. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
So sorry
We are
about that.
live. Okay.
So sorry about that. I got all this fancy equipment and none of it's working. How embarrassing. Okay, so you guys, I'm putting it in living color. All right. All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining me today. Godless Granny.
Hello. Thank you
Hi.
for having me.
And can you tell me real quick where you're calling out of?
I'm in Huntsville, Alabama.
Alabama. Okay. I don't hear the twang.
I have only lived here for 10 years. I didn't pick it up.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Well, so where you originally from?
Wisconsin.
Okay. All right. So again, so sorry about the delay. I have a pretty nice setup, but sometimes, well, you know how the internet and all that stuff works. Sometimes it's working great. Sometimes it's just totally going haywire, and the time that it goes haywire makes you want to kill either yourself or someone else. So anyway, that being said, yeah, Mage, how are you doing tonight? Evening, this
Not
evening.
bad. Just sitting here chilling.
All right. I like the new picture of the wolf you got there. That looks pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So Godless Granny, double G. I like the double G, but I heard you were a former lawyer. So could you fill me in on your former career? I'm very
Um,
interested in that because my sister is a lawyer.
okay, I worked for insurance companies. The first company I worked for was Brotherhood Mutual. It was a Christian company, and I mostly did workers' compensation work for them. They insured churches, and I handled their workers' compensation claims. And then I went to work for Motorist Mutual, and I did primarily automobile claims. So I've always done my work in insurance law.
Oh, okay. So my sister was, um, well, she's a politician now, but she was a former defense lawyer. So yeah,
Okay. Mhm.
public defender.
Criminal defense.
But then she also worked for United Farm Workers. Are you familiar with the United Farm Workers?
Hmm. Hmm.
Caesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta. Well, anyway,
Hmm.
because it is funny because a lot of people give lawyers a bad rap because they always assume that they're like these money hungry people with no moral compass whatsoever. But there's a lot of lawyers that are doing a lot of great work around the world, right? But
Hmm.
it's always these extreme people that always give everybody else a bad name. So, but I did hear that you had a good lawyer joke. I got a few myself, so that'll be a funny icebreaker.
You want to hear my lawyer joke?
Go for it.
Okay.
Absolutely,
There's a doctor, a
I got a few
priest,
of them
and a
myself.
lawyer that are all the best of friends, and they play golf together once a week, every week. And uh, and a millionaire. And the millionaire dies. And when he dies, he leaves his
Okay.
entire fortune to be split in three between the doctor, the lawyer, and the priest. And one day the three of them got together, and the priest says, I have to make a confession to you. I the will specified that the estate was to be liquidated, and we were to throw all of the cash into the casket. And I just thought it was such a waste to throw all that cash into that casket. I kept back $10,000 to build a new Sunday school wing for the church. And the doctor said, "Well, I felt exactly the same way, and I have to confess, I kept back $100,000, and I bought a new kidney dialysis machine for our hospital. Our hospital really needed it. He did not need that cash in his casket." And the lawyer said, "Gentlemen, I am ashamed of you. I threw in my personal check for the entire amount."
That is great. That is great. Well, do you know the difference between a dead dog and a dead lawyer? on the road.
People will avoid the dead dog.
Well, there's skid marks before the dog. So,
Mhm.
really quick, I don't want to make this totally about lawyers or atheists, but I was wondering if you could briefly tell me because you told me that you worked for a Christian company. So, were
Mhm.
you a Christian in your former life?
Oh yeah, I was
Can
a
you tell me
Christian
briefly
for
about that?
42 years.
Go ahead.
Uh,
40. Wow.
what do you want?
That's older than me.
What? I'm not godless granny for nothing. I'm
That's
older
older
than
than
I
me. I'm
look.
41.
Yeah, I'm 62.
Oh, yeah. I saw you fixing out. Your hair looked just fine beforehand. So, no need to
Hmm.
fix your hair.
I'm
So, I
the
was
same
waiting. I
age as
did see
Frank
that. I
Turek.
could see you, Johnny, just for the reference. Frank Turk. Oh, condolences. All right. So, so you taught me recently when you deconverted and when you started to make atheist content.
Okay, you're cutting out a bit there, so I didn't hear the whole question. You want to hear about when I deconverted and what?
Started making atheist content.
Okay. Um, okay. I deconverted when my son started showing me atheist content. My son was 17 at the time, and he had recently lost his faith, and I was aware of that. And I didn't really feel a whole lot about it one way or the other. Um, I was obviously concerned for his eternal salvation, but he made the comment to me one day, Mom, Noah's Ark didn't happen. For one thing, the poop, the
Mhm.
methane gas from the poop on the ark from all those animals would have killed everyone on the ark. And so after my son left the room, I looked it up and I found about three different websites that all confirmed that my son was correct, that there's no way that a single window at the top of the ark could possibly have ventilated all of that methane gas from all of that poop from the animals. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Then my son showed me an ARC protest video. And in the ARC protest video, one thing that really got my ire was this banner they had that said, Incest and Genocide Park. And I said, Noah's Ark isn't about incest and genocide. I mean, after all, there was no yeah, I guess there was a genocide. They kind of killed everybody, didn't they? There was no incest. Yeah, I guess there really was incest because after the flood, everybody was all related to one another, and they had to start all over with everyone being related to one another. So,
At least
you
the
know,
next generation.
yeah, it got me to thinking about the whole story of Noah in a way that I had never looked at it before. But the kicker for me, the thing that topped it off was in that same video, Aaron Ross said, Noah's Ark, we don't just know that it couldn't happen, we know that it didn't happen. And we know this from history, geology, mythology, biology, genetics. And when he said history, a light bulb went on for me because I suddenly thought about it. And I thought about the fact that,
Yeah, of
okay,
course.
the story of the Tower of Babel tells you that there were no humans on the entire planet for 100 years until the Tower of Babel and God dispersed the people. And yet there's civilizations all around the world that did not just all come to a crashing
Hmm.
halt for a
Right.
minimum. It'd have to be a minimum of 100 years because after the 100 years, when the people start dispersing, now you need time for people to travel from Babylon to China and to South America and to you know Australia, and none of these civilizations have this huge gap period where they vanished entirely
Hmm.
and started over. And what's more, if you compare the pottery and the literature of Neolithic China from the alleged pre-flood period to the alleged post-flood period, There's no change. What did he do? Teach all the people that
Right.
went and repopulated China how to do the art and the literature of the previous civilization? Yeah. I just realized that he was right. It didn't happen. And
Mm-hmm.
because the form of Christianity that I was taught included biblical inerrancy, which was that every word,
Mm-hmm.
every story literally happened and every word is true. And if just one thing in it is wrong, the whole thing falls because it's the perfect
Mm-hmm.
word of a perfect God. So just knowing that Noah's Ark
Mm-hmm.
didn't happen was enough to shatter my entire faith because it was all built on this idea of biblical inerrancy.
Mage, have you spent much time? Because you've mentioned RN Raw a few times, and in some of our talks. So, have you spent much time on this channel or looking into stuff on evolution or the flood?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I've watched
What are your thoughts on
Arden's uh pretty much the same as Godless Granny there. There's no way it could have happened.
Right,
I also like Guts Gibbons' take about how
right.
the whole planet would have basically been essentially a mini star, or if it actually did happen. The
What do you mean?
thermodynamics and the radiation, all the radiation, everything that and all the heat that'd be generated from such an event would basically turn the planet into a mini star.
Yeah, the young Earth creationists claim that the Pangea, all of the planets from the
Mhm.
Pangea, I'm planets, all of the continents from the Pangea all moved in a single year from Pangea to where they are today. And somebody calculated how much heat that would generate from that kind of movement of the tectonic plates in such a short period of time. And it would have vaporized the Earth several times over.
Also, the amount of believe it or not, the
Wow.
rainfall required to that producing that kind of rainfall would also generate is also going to be generating heat, generating energy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, in addition to all of that
Hmm.
heat,
So,
if you look at the nuclear decay rates, they claim that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. If you cram all of the heat generated from the nuclear decay that has happened over the course of the billions of years that the Earth has existed, if you cram all of that into 6,000 years, the Earth would have had to have been hotter than the sun at the time of the Garden of Eden.
so, Granny, I saw you recently released a video on, was it YouTube or Twitter, about the Earth being 6,000 years old. Can you tell me very briefly about that? Because I do want to get into our topic, actually.
Okay, are you talking about the one where I was talking about Mike Johnson being a young Earth creationist? The one that I just released this morning? Or are you talking about a
I
different one?
Yeah, just like 10 hours ago or something.
Okay, yeah.
You just did it.
Um, yeah, that one was focusing on the fact that the Speaker of the House of the United States is a young Earth creationist. He actually believes that the Earth is only
Hmm.
6,000 years old, that Adam and Eve were literal people, that Noah's Ark literally happened. He buys into all these conspiracy theories.
Mm. Well, I don't want to get too much into theology. I was just curious about what you're doing because I am. Speaking of which, I think this is a good introduction because I grew up in a pretty fundamentalist with parents as ministers. They're hardcore Pentecostal, who I think they did buy into the whole like 6,000 year old Earth, even any of that. I don't. I'm certainly not an Arianist, but on the other hand, there are things that are explicitly not in there that people just use their imagination to pull out. When I was in Bible college, we call it reading from the Book of Imaginations or the Book of Second Opinions, because I would not read that book and assume that the Earth is 6,000 years old. I simply wouldn't. I mean, you have to read, you have to use your imagination to say that it says that, at bare minimum. But there's a lot of, I mean, I have some unorthodox ideas on that, but the idea though is that, if you're in a, if you're in a echo chamber where everyone around you also believes that same kind of thing, then you're not exposed to other kinds of, science or logic. Or for me, I'm in history. I don't know much about the science part, or, about law like you do, but, I am more of a interested in history, and definitely I would definitely know that you can't read all that stuff. You can't read it exactly, literally, that everything got wiped out 6,000 years ago, because there's civilizations that were still around. And, are you familiar with, um, a guy by the name of Mr. Batman? He's a Christian apologist.
I have heard of him, and someone asked me to respond to him, and so I did look at one of his videos, but I haven't really done a whole lot with his.
I mean, he is like the crackpot of like Christian Paul. I mean, he's out there. I mean, the guy like literally goes up to preach with a gun in his hip. I mean, he's out there. So anyway, anyway, he was in a debate, and he said, well, basically the question was, did God break up the dynasties of ancient Egypt to do this flood and then somehow get people back there? And he's like, yeah, he did. God did. And like with no explanation onto what the person was getting at, like, what about these other civilizations and stuff. So if you're gonna just say, well, I don't care to entertain new data, I can understand how you could hold on to such beliefs. But, to me, it's pretty out there, that people would believe that the universe is 6,000 years. I mean, it is just so insane for me to wrap my mind around. But obviously, you have experience with that. If you weren't exposed to things into your 60s, right, or late 50s,
Um,
when did this
my path is
transition
kind of a
happen?
meandering one because I was a young earther for a while, but I left young Earth long ago. Um, I've told a number of people the story is that one of the mistakes that the young earthers made was to make a falsifiable claim. They claimed that fish cannot grow lungs and then crawl out of the water. And then I went to the Shed Aquarium and I saw lungfish. I said, there they are. They're right there. Fish with lungs. Fish can most definitely grow lungs. And so I knew the
Really?
young earthers were wrong. I also went to a church where there were some
Mm,
people there who were young earthers, but the pastor was not. And the pastor had some disdain for Ken Ham
mm,
because Ken Ham was of the position that if you are not a young earther,
mm,
you are not a Christian. And he said, I know a lot of very intelligent apologists and theologians who are not young earthers. And so to claim that if you're not a young earther, you're not saved is just, I don't remember what word
right.
he used, but basically stupid. And so
Yeah.
we
Again,
didn't have a lot of respect for
that's the
him.
Book of Imaginations right there. It's
Hmm.
specifically in the Book of Imaginations. All right.
Well, the
So
reason,
I
the
do want
way
to
they
get into
get,
this right away. Then, I want to start off with Mage. Sorry. Good.
oh, okay, what I was going to say was the way they
Good.
get to the 6,000 years is that they use the genealogies. The Bible has the genealogy from Adam all the way to Jesus. And if you figure, the Bible tells you that Adam and Eve lived 900 years, and, they lived so many years before they started having children. And when you add up the years, that's how they come up with the 6,000.
Yeah, it was just some guy adding all the stuff up.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I do want to transition to this topic, because I mean we could talk about this for a long
Yeah.
time. But, Mage, specifically, so we are talking a bit about how to avoid, indoctrination via echo chambers, because I have noticed this, and I have, this is the first thing I have wrote down here, is that if you're pissing people off on both sides, either one, it's a sign that you're an asshole, and like nobody likes you, or two, it could also be a sign that you are speaking truth that both sides are not comfortable with, because this word non-binary has been, I believe, hijacked recently to only have to do with, or not only, but primarily concerned with people who are who don't fall into traditional like gender roles, something in between or neither. But really, just non-binary means like not a one or a zero, not on either side. Because when people start to see things specifically just from one side or through one filter, it could lead to some distortion. And I am very much seeing this right now with the Israel Hamas thing. Like you have both
Oh,
sides
yeah.
who just say our side is right, the other side is like evil, you know? And like there's a common ground here in between there where um because like a month ago, because I've spent time in Palestine, and a month ago I would have said I am precisely 50% pro Palestine and 50% pro Israel, because I've been in there and I have seen some of the conditions people live under. And I've also been invited into a mosque and I lived in a mosque for a week and learned about Islam and learned how they lived and stuff. And I saw these are some amazingly beautiful and hospitable people. And of course, it's always the one percenters who out there who are giving the whole group a bad name. But when the things that took place last last month, uh, that kind of put things into a different light for me. But because I started to become more pro-Israel, but at this point I'm like, okay, this is going too far. You know, like at some point you have to say like this is just too much. You know what I mean? Like there's been too much on both sides. And so I don't think either side can take complete moral high ground at this point. So can you give me your thoughts on that real quick, Mage? Like if you see what you've seen from on both ends of that specific issue.
Uh, Definitely wrong what Hamas did when they first did the whole attacks, but this doesn't justify what Israel's doing with basically trying to genocide the whole Palestinians in Gaza. Uh, Besides that, the Hamas leaders aren't even in Gaza, so I think they're in what was Qatar, I believe it was mentioned. So why aren't they going after them there? But
Hold on. I do got to call it out because I have heard that. Hold on, I have heard that accusation of genocide, and genocide has to do when you're trying to wipe out like an entire group of people. So
well, that
there's been
does seem to be what they're trying to
we could
do.
argue on how much of an effort. Hold on. I'm speaking. Hold on, I'm speaking. There's We could argue on whether or not they've taken enough of approach to try to spare civilians because from what I've seen reported, they've done a somewhat good job. And of course, we're just going off of what we see off the news. So who knows how accurately that is being portrayed.
Hmm.
But when you're making efforts to then you can't make the claim that they're trying to commit genocide because genocide would mean they just go in and just bomb everything. So
Well, I
that's
have
not
heard.
really an accurate
Well, I
assessment.
have heard.
But do you have any
I
thoughts on
have.
that, Granny? No, okay, but
Um,
The Brits made a big mistake
oh,
when
yeah,
they
good.
when they created this the you know they created a mess when they created the state of Israel because they did not take care of the Palestinian people. They didn't recognize the people that were already there. And there is no solution to the problem. There never has been, and I don't think there ever will be. And so I think it's just always going to be a mess. You're
uh,
right. There's neither side has the moral high ground. Neither side has, a complete right to anything. And yet they cannot they have not been able to find a way to live together.
and on the whole thing going on the
Right.
genocide thing, they have been situations where they were told to evacuate to a location in Gaza, and then they bombed on the evacuation point.
Right,
There have been
right,
reports of that happening.
right. I have heard that as well. But anyway, this isn't about. I didn't want to make this into pro Palestine or
Yeah,
pro
it's not
Israel.
so much a
That's not what I was going
no.
with this. The point
Mm.
is that both. What was that?
both both sides are in the wrong on here.
No, the yeah. The point is that either sides just come with this like we're not going to make any compromises, and it's the other side who is 100% bad, and we're in the 100% right. And that kind of like binary thinking is nowhere. I mean, it just rarely ever exists in the universe, and it seems like that's the problem though. Like with echo chambers, is that like you just keep hearing the same thing repeated over and over and over again, and you never take a step back to evaluate things objectively. And I do so I do want to ask you something real quick, uh, Granny, because have you ever been disabused of a toxic belief that you were holding
Oh
on
yeah.
to?
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, so I'll let you answer that, but I do want to ask, just give a little bit more context because I don't think most people at the time of holding on to toxic belief or toxic ideas about relationships, I don't think most people would be able to recognize that because it comes to become normal for you. Like especially
Mm-hmm.
with relationships when you start to mimic what you've seen your parents do, and you're like, oh yeah, this is normal, but you get around other people who haven't had those same kind of experiences, and some of the stuff you talk about can be pretty disturbing. I definitely know that to be the case with me. But so have you, how have you been able to figure out your either have a toxic belief about relationships or a toxic belief about the world, and how did you get out of that mindset?
I don't know that I fully am yet. I think I'm still learning. Um, and for me, the big one was the
Mhm.
relationship between me and my husband. Because my church taught me that he is the head and I am to do whatever he wants and to follow him. And my role is to be his supporter and helper. And I bought that hook, line, and sinker. And, you mentioned the modeling of parents, but my parents were not believers. And so I did not consider their relationship to be a role model for me. I looked to my for role models to the elders of my church, the pastors of the church, and the books that I was reading. And I was the church librarian, and I took my guidance from the pastor as to what books I would allow into the library, and only books that towed the line of our religious faith were allowed into the library. And I read extensively, but only the books that I was putting in the library. And so it was, just completely reinforcing that. And it wasn't until after I was an unbeliever that I started listening to some people who are not in those kinds of relationships and just finding out for the first time that it doesn't have to be that way. And, one of the funniest experiences for me was going on live streams with, oh gosh, I can't remember his name now. Oh, his name escapes me. Um, he's 18 years old, or at least he was at the time. He's probably 19 or 20 by now. And he's giving me sex advice. And I'm thinking, this kid who's younger than my children by over a decade knows more about sex than I do because my knowledge of sex is so limited by the puritanical culture that I was engrossed with for so many decades, and I just find it so funny. When this is probably going to be really eye opening for you, but he told me that if you say yes to sex, it's okay to change your mind and say no. And that just floored me. That was a completely strange idea to me. You're kidding. It's okay to change your mind. Yes, it's okay. Wow. That was the big thing for me was learning that relationships do not have to be what I had always thought them to be.
Mm, interesting. What about you, Mage? Have you had a situation where you were holding on to a toxic belief, and
Uh,
either you were able to naturally hold on, you were able to naturally break free of it, or you had to have help with someone to point it out to you?
I was thinking over this one last night. It's hard to say for sure. I think probably one of my bigger stumbling blocks is not hating what I perceive as stupidity. And as I go out and try and talk to people more and more, interact with others with opposing views, I found more and more that it wasn't so much stupidity that these people had, but ignorance.
Mm.
So that's something I'm still trying to work on and overcoming. I used to really get really bad about that. Uh, that's some
Well,
the other thing I was thinking of was I'm not so sure
uh,
it's so much of a toxic eh, belief, but I definitely have changed my views on trans people all over the years, especially in recent years, only because I never really interacted with anyone who was trans up until only a few years ago, so I didn't really understand it.
mhm. So for you, it took real life.
Real life
Like,
experience, some of it, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I will have to say this, and I don't want to get caught up on this issue, but I do want to say that people like Katie Montgomery and Blair White and a few other people I can mention that I've seen online, kind of having them showing how they're able to function and to be productive, and you know, uh, student Dr. Ben as well. I think after seeing those three stories and seeing that these people are able to, they're not like deranged as people would let be led on to believe about them, but showing them function and being productive members of society, I think that's done a lot for me to help humanize them more. And the thing is that because you kind of only see, you kind of only see some of the loudest people online, people who have like the strongest views, and um, that can be somewhat off-putting for people like me, uh, who's just somewhat more in the middle of the line type guy. And so, being able to see people who are can sit down calmly and explain things to you, and hear out objections and stuff, I think that's very powerful. I do want to get on to the next question I have here, but Kelly, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about seeing toxic behavior? Because it's easy to point out and say, "Oh, those guys are really toxic. Those guys are really toxic." But what about when what's your reaction with that?
I actually am more irritated by the mainstream religious than I am by the truly toxic. I mean, when it comes
I
to
hear the
people
applause.
like the Steve Andersons and the Matt Powells and the Kent Hovines, the people who are just absolute potty mouths when it comes to the horrid things that they say about the LGBTQ community. Yeah, they are just so offensive that they end up getting banned from various platforms. And or certain
Hold on,
shows
I'm
that
not
they
talking
would
about the
get
other
banned.
side. I'm talking about things within your own side.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm not talking about things you find offensive about the other side. I'm talking about things that are abusive from your own side.
Things that are offensive within the atheist community?
Yeah. Specifically.
I don't find a whole lot really offensive within the atheist community. I mean, obviously people blunder, and all of us do. We're human, and occasionally you find one, a bad apple that is doing something. Like Jim Majors, that
Hmm.
was caught in horrendous child abuse, and so he was basically banned from the community. And you do, and then you get people who, they're generally really good people, but they seem to have taken a wrong turn somewhere, like Dawkins. Dawkins' work is absolutely phenomenal, but lately he's come out and said that the transgender people aren't real, basically. That they're just pretending, and I'm flabbergasted that someone who has the knowledge of biology that he does not see that sex is not binary, as he claimed in the video that he talked about this, that it clearly is
Hmm.
bimodal. And there's so many nuances to what goes into sex and gender. So I'm really surprised that he can't see it, and I chalk it up to age, because I see that in a lot of people when they get.
Hey, watch yourself, dude. You're
I
getting up to
know,
yourself too, Granny.
I know,
No,
I
I'm just
know, and that worries me.
kidding.
I hope I don't end up
I'm,
there, but it
I'm a
happens
young
to
buck.
some.
I'm still in my 40s.
I mean, look at Rudy Giuliani.
Hmm.
Back when he was the
Dementia.
mayor
You
of New
talking?
York, he was a reasonable
Oh,
person,
okay.
and now he's completely off his rocker.
Yeah. You
So,
know what's funny too? Because if you look at old interviews with Trump,
mhm,
he was actually pretty well, like he was pretty well put together. He was calm. He was collected. He was reasonable, and he's like one of the few people I've ever seen to get older and to get like more brazen and more obnoxious. Like normally you're like that. Like oh my god, in my 20s, I was a total. Maybe people would argue I still am, but I mean I was out there. I was a know-it-all. I was a debate everybody. Made a total jackass out of myself way too many times. Now I'm in my 40s. It's mellowed me down quite a bit, and especially being wrong, being disabused of a lot of my beliefs. And so, learning and growing, I've said, man, what am I holding on right now? That 10 years from now, I'll be like, man, you were a fool to think that that was true at the time. So it gives me
mhm,
a lot of patience and respect with dealing with people because I imagine when people had to deal with dealing with me, but there's still a lot we can all uh, grow and think about. But so if I'm hearing you right, you're generally okay with what comes out of the atheist community.
yes, generally, mhm.
Okay. What about you? What about you, Mitch?
Uh, well, what usually comes to mind on or my side would be on the left versus right kind of thing. On the left, one thing that tends to kind of annoy me is there's this almost a smugness among a lot of people, sort of trying to be more virtuous than thou, and that can often I see seems to end up
Hmm.
being displayed in sort of a you're with me 100%, or you're not with me at all.
Mhm.
And you have
Hmm.
like the well, how was put it on Cyrus did a video on this where he mentioned something about the eternal leftist, where it's nothing's good enough. You always have to go one step further, where you don't know, where you don't have, and that's basically kind of hurting the whole left as a whole. Because if you look at the right, when you look at what the right's
Right.
complaining about, like what they have in mind as a stereotype of someone who's left, that's what they're thinking about. You're not thinking about the majority of people who have nuanced ideas and aren't going to take it that far and whatnot.
Right. Right. So, right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that word nuance here. There's nuance, or the other thing too is that you just really don't know the reasons why people are holding on to whatever views. You have the own filter of what you think of people with those views, or how you've come to your own conclusion. But they may have information that you are ignorant of, and so if you might have had that information, you could change your views. So we become too dogmatic, I think, and I think that's it's dangerous on both sides. I could tell you that very strongly as a Christian. But you know, since we've already let the cat out the bag with this one, I will say this: from this community, I have been told flat out, if I'm a 75% ally, if I'm a 90% ally, I'm an enemy. Flat out. No nuance, no discussion, nothing else, unless I go with along everything that comes out from the side. I'm just an enemy, and I've literally been told that I'm an enemy. And it doesn't matter if I'll help the people out. It doesn't matter if I stand against bullying or whatever. If I'll be their friends or anything like that, unless I agree with 100% of what comes out of this side, I'm an enemy. So that to me is extremely dangerous and unhelpful talking, um, talking to people. It turns people off, because people like me, I do consider myself a moderate, and I could be useful inside of the more conservative. Not that I'm a conservative, but I could be a voice of moderation from a lot of these people. But I have been relentlessly attacked online. You know what I mean?
I
But
was actually expecting it with the before the show started. uh,
oh, you didn't get any?
I didn't get any, but I do get where you're coming from. I mean, somebody who's
You didn't
a
get any rage?
Christian. No, I didn't get any. I do with somebody who's a Christian, somebody who's maybe a little bit more right leaning, in the people who are conservative and right leaning are probably going to listen to that more than they're going to listen to, say, me, who's a progressive, left atheist, or granny, for pretty much on the same side. I mean, that's because you're in their club, basically. They're going to perceive you as being in their club, so they're going
Right,
to take that information in the heart. So just like how there's an experiment
right.
where we have people listening to you know uh, conservative media, liberal media, and depending on what side you already fall on, you're going to listen to that side of the media more and take that to heart more than you are, and you're going to dismiss the other side more. And same thing playing out.
Yeah. Granny, I just noticed that you have a rocking chair. Do you also have any like something to knit with, like in the background over there? Are those knit? Okay. Oh, you do, and you do bake cookies too.
Oh yeah, I've got a couple of baking videos. They're older because and they're not very popular, so I don't do them very often. But I do have a few baking videos, and if you look on some of Critical Cripple's streams where I'm on, I'm crocheting while I'm talking. But
Crochet.
I didn't bring anything with me
All
today,
right.
but I do crochet.
Um, you're okay talking just a little bit, like nothing in detail, like family stuff, real quick, just to break this up,
Sure.
because I have heard it said that being a grandparent is more enjoyable than being a parent, because well, there's a lot of reasons why I've heard, but one of the things, especially now when I look back, because my daughter's about 6 years old, like I would give anything to rewind the clock talk back to when my wife was pregnant because I just learned so much. I've learned so much in the last 6 years, and I would love to be able to have that time again with the knowledge that I have right now. You know,
Mhm.
because I feel like I've made so many mistakes, and um, I would think that if you're a parent, if you're a parent and you've gone through that, and then you get to see your children become a parents, that must be you're just in a totally different stage of your life. So how have you found that experience, like being a grandparent? Because obviously important to you if you put it in your name.
Mhm. It is, but on the other hand, I also don't get to see my grandchildren very often. Um, 4 of them live on the East
Oh,
Coast and 1 lives on the West Coast, and
yeah.
I live in the middle, and so I generally only
Hmm.
see them once a year.
Mm.
Um, and Bree pointed out that
Oh, really?
it's Critical Cupcake now. I said Critical Cripple, that is what the channel used to be called, it's Critical Cupcake now. Um, anyway, yeah, I know exactly what you mean about wanting to go back, but on the other hand, I also don't want to do that. Granted, there are a lot of things I did wrong, and I wish I could fix them. But I'd be willing to bet a dollar to a donut hole that if I did go back and fix them, I'd make an entirely new set of mistakes. And and
Oh, right,
I'd
right,
hate
right.
even more to get to this point
Wow,
a second time and say, "Boy, I sure blew it this way the first time, and I blew it that way the second time."
wow.
How many different ways could I blow?
Oh, oh God. Oh, you put chills all over. Look at this. Look at my arm. Oh God, you put chills all over me.
Mhm.
Oh, you gave me the heebie-jeebies.
In one respect, I did get an opportunity to do that in that I had 2 children, and then there's a 12-year gap, and then my youngest child came. And the way I raised my youngest child is quite different than the way I raised my
Really?
older 2. But it isn't so much style of
Right,
parenting thing
right,
as it was an economic thing. When the first 2 came, we were very young and
right,
we
right,
had nothing. And so when the kids would ask for something, we'd say, "We can't
right,
afford that." By the time the last one came along,
right,
we had been saving for a long time and we were in a completely different economic class. And so sometimes the
right.
older 2 would get jealous that the youngest one got whatever he wanted because we could afford anything by the time he came along. Um,
So how old were you when you had the last child, by the way?
I was 40 when the youngest was born.
Wow. Oh my God. So I hate to use the word accident, but like, was it like unplanned,
Oh, no, not at
or
all.
were you guys?
Um, well,
It was it was
when the
planned.
first 2 came along, I was working full time, and I really felt like I missed a lot of their toddler years because working full time, I hired a nanny that came in and took care of
Mm,
them,
mm,
but I just felt like I missed out on so much. And so when they got to be in they're 10, 12 years old, I said to my husband, I want another one that I can stay home with. Now that we can afford for me to stay home, I want to stay home. And so we did. We had another one and I stayed home with the last one. And I'm so glad I had the last one. I'm closer to the youngest than I am
wow.
to the older 2.
That's I'm I'm really glad you got to have that experience. I there's I could make a whole episode on just this topic alone, the parenting thing. But I got to tell you, I do want to say this, and then we'll get back to the topic at hand, because the kind of selfish person I am, I've thought about this a lot, and I've thought like, well, one, I've thought I don't want to have another kid because I feel like the love that I have for my daughter would be diminished, because like I only have one child, so it's like I can give all my love to her. And so, but then I've heard other people say, well, it increases the size of your heart, because like I felt like my heart was this big before I had my daughter, and then it ballooned to like I never even imagined I could have that level of love. It just unfathomable to me, like it just something impossible. Like if I told you you could lift the Empire State Building, you just wouldn't even think it wouldn't even enter into your mind. But then I've started to say like, well, when I compare the love that I have to my daughter, the only other relationship that would make any sense would be that to I had to my mom. But if my mom were still alive, like the love that I feel for my daughter, from my mom to my daughter would feel like the pinky of my mom. So it's like I think about this. If my daughter had a kid, she's gonna have that same level of like almost irrelevance now to her baby. And I thought, man, I don't want to be a grandparent because I don't want that to happen. But then I thought, man, how amazing would it be for my child to feel the same level of love and wholeness that she's brought me. Um, but I know the selfishness is Isaiah. It's like it's a catch twenty
The
two.
best the best part of grandparenting is I no longer have the energy to take care of a child, but I can enjoy my grandchildren for a couple of days and then they go home and I can rest.
Yeah, so sounds
Right,
great
right,
being a grandparent. You can spoil them rotten, get them all hyper, then hand them back to the parents.
Exactly. Exactly.
right.
You can live
So I do want to
vicariously
get back.
through them. But what?
Get back to the
Oh yeah. Oh,
topic
sorry.
here.
Please continue. But I do want to get back to the topic.
Uh, where are we here?
Exactly. Part-time kids are the best. Are you there?
Can you hear
Okay,
us?
Granny. Real quick, I just want to end out with a couple of few questions, and then yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear
Hmm.
you. Mhm.
Granny, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So ask out just two more questions, and I am very curious to get your both of your intakes on this, your inputs. But how do you filter out fake news? Because I think this is probably the chamber because you have the same kind of information that just keeps getting shared and shared, and it doesn't matter how outlandish it is, because prior to prior to coming onto this today, I was looking at this like pseudoscience that was got circulated whenever I was a kid among the Christian community, and we see it and we're like, oh, like we get wide eyes, because we don't really know any difference. The concepts they're talking about are out of our league to start off with, so it's hard to decipher what is true and not true. So, do you have any thoughts on that yourself?
I just you have to you have to figure out what are sources that are trustworthy versus sources that are not trustworthy. For me, my top three sources are the New York Times, CNN, and ABC News. I also look at the Guardian, the Washington Post. But anytime you get something that's not doesn't seem quite right, or you're just not sure of it, verify it in two or three other sources. And of course, the
Right,
most important thing
verify.
is
That's
checking
true.
out what kind of sources are you using. If someone's quoting you an article and it's from Answers in Genesis, that tells you right off the bat it's not going to be trustworthy.
But
A
I
couple.
noticed something though. You you gave all American sources for that. So, is there any reason why you don't look to other sources from other countries?
Generally, the news that comes to me the most is centered on my own country. I do sometimes look at BBC News, but I consider that a secondary source. I'm
Mhm.
not as
Okay.
familiar with the foreign news agencies as to know which ones are more reliable than others, and the sources that I just gave you do have world bureaus in each of them, and do have some worldwide coverage for each of them.
Yeah, but what are your thoughts on this? Because when I was in when I was in middle school, I remember our teacher taught us this saying. I still remember it. That was like 30 years ago. But she said, half the truth is often a great lie, and not giving a full or accurate picture. I mean, it may not be a lie flat out, but it is at minimum dishonest to because and I'll tell you one of the ways you see this the most. And I guess this is what I'll have to say is trusting early, because it's usually the first stuff that comes out is the most inaccurate, right?
Not
If there's a mass
necessarily.
shooting or whatever, the first numbers that are coming out are always like extremely
Oh,
accurate.
number terms that can be.
It I said usually, but well, numbers, but also just in terms of just accuracy, because I don't know how either people just get information that is was fault. The source was just bad from the beginning, and so it has to be corrected later on. And so I don't know personally. I not to say that I'm. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that I always have a good filter for this, but I do try to at least wait for a little bit more information. You said verify 2 or 3 times, but I kind of just see it as waiting a little bit to see, if better information is coming out. And specifically, I got to ask you this: Did you actually see? Did you actually see any of the unedited footage that was coming out of Israel?
No.
Because it was all being censored on the. Yeah, well, Ben Shapiro, I did see it on Ben Shapiro. He did a special where he was showing all of the unedited footage, and it was like, I don't know. I do want to ask you that. Why exactly do you think it is that the media like censors so much of that? I'm curious about that.
Well, first of all,
Do you have
you're
any thoughts?
assuming that they do, uh, which is a big assumption. But yeah, it can be any number of reasons. The media obviously self censors content that is inappropriate for some audiences. For example, showing actual deaths, people dying, people being shot and dying. That is extremely triggering for some people and is inappropriate for a lot of audiences. And you never know who's going to be watching a national news broadcast. There could be children watching this. And so they do have to self censor things that are inappropriate for a child to see. Um, and I think that is a lot of it. But, not having seen the uncensored, I really can't answer what was censored and why it was censored. I can't answer that because I haven't seen it.
Well, I have heard of situations with mainstream
Mitch?
medias where they try and make something look bigger than it actually is. Such like if you have a protest, they'll film it in a way where it looks like there's a lot of people there, but if you actually backed out from the camera, you'd see there's only just a few people that they're focusing on. I personally don't particularly trust mainstream media all that much, because it's just basically a handful of corporation, and it's telling you the same thing, just from whatever slant they want to give you. Yeah, but so it can get really dicey to kind of suss that stuff out. I find usually with any kind of sites like CNN, whatever, or I like to try and read them from the bottom up, because usually they'll bury the really pertinent stuff in the bottom or in the middle of the article, where most people aren't actually going to read them, because most people will read just the title
Mm.
and maybe just the first paragraph or so.
Guilty as charged, admittedly. Sometimes I'll just scan it.
And I
But so
a
okay,
couple
so
of
I'll tell you
just
this. If you
something I can add to that. I do have a couple of tools I do use on
mhm.
for websites called one's called Miyabaya is fact check and the other is called All Sides. Basically, these are kind of they'll just kind of look at these sites. I mean, still you want to take it with a grain of salt. Well, but they'll look at the sites. They'll look at how honest the reporting is. They are what side of the position there, so whether the right leaning, left leaning, and kind of gives you an evaluation, on screen of a site. So if it's a site that you're not really familiar with, just plug it into those two sites, and you can get at least a little bit more of an idea of what you're dealing with, kind of beast you're dealing with.
I, Granny, I just want to give you a quick example that I've been, because I've been doing a lot of research on race and racism because I'm finishing my third book right now on racism, and I came across this one case where this black teen was shot by a police officer, and normally, like the media is so biased whenever it represents articles pertaining like specifically with black people because they'll say like a white officer detains a black whatever it says whatever like right in the first title it'll tell you exactly their race and I saw this other one where it says like it said like cop shoot this black teen and I looked in there and I was trying to find any information about the cop and it wasn't giving any information, any pictures, any kind of racial information. And I went to like 4 or 5 different sources in America, and I couldn't find anything. And then I'm pretty sure it was based in the UK. I went to their website, and it actually had a picture of the cop, and the cop was black. And I'm like, why couldn't they at least like just report on the fact? Giving you half of the information seemed really, really dishonest, in my opinion, that they're trying to promote this narrative, and they'll only present facts that are in line with that. So, CBC, only candidate. This person says, I look at CBC because I find it good news about our country from someone outside of it. All right, yeah, that's good. That's good to give like a good, well balanced view. But I think I did have one more question here. Um, Mage, you got anything else to add?
Uh, Sometimes bad at sources actually can be good. I've heard of situations like where the Inquirer, or it's usually a trash tabloid, a news article got the reporting being spot on compared to some of the other sources. Or one example I personally ran into, who I don't usually trust the Daily Mail. They usually do a lot of pseudoscience and garbage and really skew who what they have. But there was this one story that they did. And I happened to be following that story, getting the information directly from the people who were involved. Well, so I was able to actually look at the news articles coming out from that
Hmm.
perspective. And oddly enough, Daily Mail actually got it the most accurate. So sometimes that can happen, and
Well, I
but
do want to say this that they have been accurate. Yeah, but if they tell you that there's a bat boy living in the West Wing, I would definitely not take their advice on that one.
yeah, generally I
Granny,
wouldn't rely on
do you
Daily
remember all
Mail.
of that with the National Enquirer? Yeah, and the National Enquirer usually did some ridiculous stuff. But let's see. I
Examiner.
do want to have any last question. Yeah. So I don't think I put this one in there, but because I do want to tell you something about a family member that I have that he has some. like outrageously, unbelievably, I'll call it flat out evil, like views on Jewish people. Like in his summation, like I mean, there could be an earthquake and he'll find a way to blame it on the Jews in some way or another. And all these books and stuff that just designed to paint the Jewish as the most evil orchestrators of everything throughout history. And I have tried to talk to him in the past, but I mean, nothing I say even comes close to breaking through into his mind. And I'm wondering, do you have any ideas on like how to approach someone like that who's like in a really solid echo chamber and they're not really open up to any ideas? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think the best thing to do is introduce him to someone that's Jewish and don't tell them that the person is Jewish. Let them develop a relationship. And once he sees that this person is a kind person, a good person, then you let him know that the guy is
Mm,
Jewish, and let it shatter some of his stereotypes with something that he already knows to be that what he thought about this person is false.
mm,
If the person is willing to sit down and
mm.
talk, you can use the more Socratic method on them, asking questions of what they believe and why they believe and all that, and try and get them to start questioning their own views. It's kind of through that. It's actually the technique
Well,
that's used with what is called
well, I just
street
want to.
epistemology.
Yeah, I mean specifically with this person though, what I'm trying to get at is that like, so I went to his house one time to help him move, and he kept wanting to have these conversations like about the Bible and about Jews and about the real name of God. And I'm like, dude, I'm not here to have any kind of discussion like that. I'm here to help you move. Like I only have a few hours here. Like I want to help move. And just for the record, he's like a right wing like Trumpster. He's a trumpet. And I had to tell him like three times like I don't know why I have to keep telling you this. Like I'm not interested in having any debate because especially the stuff that he wanted to talk about. I mean, he's talking about Babylon and all this like stuff from the Israeli exile, and I'm like, dude, I don't have any information on that. I don't know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? You might as well be speaking in Chinese right now. And after about the fourth time, I'm like, dude, like if you keep this up, man, like I'm just gonna leave. And so then he kept going on, and I'm like, hey, I'm not gonna say his name, but I'm like, hey man, I'm gonna go. He's
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm not shaking your hand, and he turns around and he walks away like, oh, like. So I
Huh.
don't know. It's a situation where I feel kind of like helpless. And honestly, I've not spoken to this guy in probably like 6 years. So
Hmm.
um, it might
I
be
think
something that might just be like a lost cause. I don't know. I guess at the end of the day,
I think in a situation like that, I would probably said,
you think
you
it's a
know,
lost cause, Granny, or has to happen organically?
Not knowing the person, I really can't say, but I my sister is
Mm-hmm.
is a MAGA, and there's just no talking to her, and so I just can't do it. You know,
I think in that circumstance, I probably would have said, okay, maybe we're kind of busy with trying to get you to move. Could maybe we can talk about this later? So I leave that door open for him to be able to have that conversation that he
Yeah.
wants to
Well,
have, but just not that at that moment.
well, one time he was trying to have the conversation with me when my nephew was there, and my nephew was like 5, 6 years old. I'm like, dude, I am not having this conversation. If I'll have a conversation without my nephew there because I didn't want anything going into my nephew's mind. That
Hmm.
anyway. That's thank you for your guys' input on that. All right, do you have any last thoughts, Mage? Before we wrap out, we've already got 9 minutes over, but that's make up for the 9 minutes we got started later.
Well,
The
I
stupid
suppose
internet.
on
Mage,
our
you got any last
uh,
thoughts?
going back on our topic, it's one thing to do about avoiding echo chambers. We got to keep in mind that our search engines and our social media are designed to put us in echo chambers. So if we
Hmm.
go on and do searches on things that are opposite to what we tend to look at, say if you tend to look at
Search it out.
CNN and as your look at Fox News. It was just to keep that algorithm from feeding you into an echo chamber.
Hmm. Hmm. That's good, man. That's good. And search it out too. Like go
Yeah,
deliberately
search it
go out of
out.
your way rather than
Yeah,
just seeing what's
go
coming
out of
up
your
on your
way. Go
feeds.
go go
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
to those right wing in Twitter or sites. Post something on there. Question them or chew them out if you want. They'll feed into that algorithm and it's like, oh, you're going to this site who has this view. Okay, we're gonna give you more of that. Okay, when we're going to do that one, we're gonna give you. Well, now we're giving you both. So you're not just getting one side.
Annie, you got any last thoughts?
Not really. I think, what Mage said is good. I do tend to engage a lot with people who disagree with me, and I do think it keeps me sharper. Occasionally I come up with an argument that's really stupid, and they'll point it out, and we're like, yeah, that was kind of stupid, wasn't it? And so I do think that engaging with the other side keeps us sharp.
By the way, I do want to close off with a quick story because so I'm 41, but through this channel in my 41 years of existence, I saw one of the craziest stories I've ever heard of in my life, and it's of this rapper, this Scottish rapper, and he was on Vice. Actually, I saw it on Vice, and I contacted him and I interviewed him on the channel. But he was in Scotland and he faked like he was from California. Him and his friend, they faked like they were from California, and to go down and fool the British like industry. They were saying they were friends with Eminem and all kinds. They made up this really elaborate story, and they they wind up doing it, and they wind up getting caught eventually several years later. But after they made all this money and met all these celebrities and stuff, did all these tours, and I talked to him and I asked him, like, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, like prior to this, like what would you have told your younger self? And I thought he was going to say to avoid what he actually did, and he said the only thing I would tell the younger guy, he says first of all, I wouldn't want to change anything. He said because the path that I had to go down is what brought me to be who I am today, and I needed to go down and because it hit some pretty bad points for him, to the point of like suicide, uh, trying to commit suicide and losing everything, having everything, just the whole house of cards crumble down on him. And I was so shocked that he told me that he wouldn't have changed anything, and that the only thing that he would have told himself was just to have more confidence, because he really like, uh, he, oh, look at this. You need a really elaborate backstory. That's funny. Well, I'm gonna tell you how this is related. That's my specialty. That's funny. Thank you, Purple, for the love on the channel. But the point is that I think the mistakes that we make wind up contributing to who we are today. And you said something. I am going to be thinking about this for the next like week or month. But you would make a whole new, brand new set of mistakes. That is fascinating. That was a fascinating take. And I think just with this whole topic, like I look back on myself 10 years ago, and I very frequently thought that I would wish I could go back and like beat up the younger version of myself, because I was such a jerk in so many different ways. But I thought, man, maybe like a better fit version of myself, 60 years old, who's actually gotten himself into shape, maybe he'd come back and beat me up right now. And I try to have that same level of understanding where I'm at right now. Like, it doesn't mean because I have these views now, doesn't mean I'm gonna hold on to them, because a lot of the views I might have right now might be based off misinformation or lack of experience. So it's just giving me. I really wish, in a lot of ways, I were a better person in a lot of different regards. But as it is right now, I'm doing the best I can to process information, and Lord knows I have I'm filled with misinformation, bias, ignorance. People throw around that word like it's some kind of insult. That's just a reality that we're all filled with ignorance. There's lots of things that we don't know. So I would like to see people just be a little bit more patient and empathetic as we're all trying to navigate the cosmos together. And yeah, because we're gonna change our minds, we're gonna develop new ideas, and that's the way life is. We grow. But really quick, can you tell us how to find you online, Granny?
Godless Granny is my YouTube channel, and you can find me Kelly Pearsall 3 on Twitter.
And real quick, what kind of content specifically do you make?
Mostly anti-theist content. I do a lot of reaction to Christian apologists, people like J. Warner Wallace, Frank Turek, um, uh, William Lane Craig, people like that. Occasionally, I do political commentary, like this last video I did on Mike Johnson. I do some advocacy for the transgender community, for women's rights, and so forth.
It's really hard for me to stay because I live in South Korea, so it's really hard for me to stay up to date with everything that's going on there. So I'll find out stuff that's happening. I'm like, wow, I cannot believe that that was going on. I didn't have any idea about it. But I do want to play an outro, and we do support a nonprofit for LGBT plus rights. So that's for anti-bullying, Granny. So we will make a donation in your name to that organization.
Thank you.
It's called Hate is Wrong. So yeah, that's one of the things that we do. So yeah, really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming. I'm really glad I was able to talk to you. You're a very reasonable and rational person, and we can respect each other and respect the journeys that we're on. So thank you very much. And that
Thank
being
you for
said,
having
check
me.
us out at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the YouTubes, all that good stuff. And here we go, leaving with this.